The moment when my sense of alienation in life became absolute was at my brother and Denise's wedding. The venue was a ballroom in an ultra-luxury hotel facing Malibu Beach. I wore the finest navy dress I owned, elegant, but understated enough to avoid drawing attention, and headed to the event alone. The hotel entrance was filled with the fragrance of expensive lilies and the lively chatter of the guests. Amidst that dazzling atmosphere, I fixed a practiced social smile on my face and walked toward the reception table. A young female staff member, wearing a silk ribbon pinned to her chest, welcomed me with a flawless smile. "Welcome. May I have your name, please?" "Tracy. I'm the groom Peter's sister," I added, as if my name alone might not suffice. She opened a thick binder, her manicured finger gliding down the list while maintaining that impeccable smile. But then her finger stopped. Frowning slightly, she scanned the list again, more slowly this time. Finally, she looked up at me, her expression strained. "I'm terribly sorry. I checked several times, but I don't see the name Tracy on the list." At that moment, I heard my mother's voice from behind me. "Oh, Tracy, you actually came. I thought you wouldn't. My apologies, but don't worry, we have the perfect seat for you." She laughed breezily, showing no hint of embarrassment, and with a glance to the staff, ushered me inside. It didn't take long for me to understand exactly where that so-called perfect seat was. I was led to the very back of the enormous ballroom, right beside the kitchen doors. It was the table reserved for distant relatives, obscure business associates of my father, and others who didn't quite fit anywhere else, a kind of social exile. Naturally, there was no place card with my name. Even as speeches were given, gourmet dishes served, and guests began to dance, I simply sat there with that practiced smile plastered on my face. Truthfully, I had grown used to such treatment. My father, who had made his fortune in real estate investment, always measured human worth by the profits they generated and the networks they built. And Peter, my brother, was his flawless heir. He had followed the same path, proven his talent at a young age, and continued to fulfill every one of my father's expectations, the pride of the family. I, on the other hand, grew up in complete opposition to those expectations. I was the introverted daughter who chose the unprofitable job of teaching children, loving quiet reading more than the glitter of high society. From my father's perspective, I was useless, contributing neither to his business nor to his networking. Since childhood, I had always been compared unfavorably to my brother, treated as the failure in the family's success story. And yet, there was one person my father valued perhaps even more than Peter, his bride, Denise. Behind her perfect blonde hair and calculated smile, she possessed a sharp business instinct. She was a savvy influencer who had set her sights on my father's new luxury resort project. Using her powerful social media presence and vast network, she promoted the resort as the destination for the most influential celebrities, quickly filling bookings years in advance. My father was ecstatic. My mother openly declared, "Denise is the daughter who truly elevates our family's value." To them, Denise was not a person to love, but the ultimate asset, someone who brought tangible profit to the family. Her word became law, and her presence was absolute. That absolute star of the evening chose, at the height of the celebration, to come all the way to my table. She swayed the hem of her beautiful mermaid gown as she stood beside me, her face flushed with champagne, and looked down at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. "Hey, Tracy," she cooed in an overly sweet voice. "I heard they couldn't find you a seat." I was so worried. "I'm sorry." "No, it's fine. I'm seated here," I replied. She gave a light laugh and placed her hand gently on my shoulder. Her fingers felt icy cold. Then, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, she said, "You're not really suited for a wedding. But that's okay, not everyone needs the spotlight." It was a cruel insult wrapped in the disguise of a compliment. The impact was like a blow to the stomach, leaving me breathless. While I sat in silence, unable to respond, my mother, who had been nearby chatting with friends, noticed our exchange and walked over. She had clearly heard Denise's words, yet instead of correcting her, she gazed at her with admiration. "Oh, Denise, you're so honest and charming. You really are my pride and joy." Then she turned to me with cold, curious eyes and, as though making a casual joke, added loudly enough for several people to hear, "Sometimes I wonder when I look at Tracy, is she really my child?" By then, it wasn't even an insult anymore. It was a quiet yet absolute declaration that stripped away the very core of my existence. The music, the laughter, everything around me vanished completely. But within that vacuum, from the shattered fragments of my heart, a single burning emotion emerged. It was anger. A searing anger, like molten magma, that I had suppressed for years deep inside me. I rose slowly from my seat. And standing before Denise and my mother, both still smiling perfectly, I looked them straight in the eye. "Congratulations, Denise." My voice was lower and calmer than even I expected. In the noisy ballroom, it rang out with startling clarity. "So this is the kind of family you wanted. I understand now. I'll be stepping down from this charade of an extra role effective today." Then I turned toward my mother. "Mother, if that's truly how you feel, then there's no need for me to remain your daughter. Thank you for everything up until now." I gave a slight bow, then turned my back on their stunned faces. Step by step, I walked toward the exit. I thought I heard someone call my name, but I didn't look back. When I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into the cold night air, I felt, for the very first time in my life, that I was finally walking on my own path. From that day forward, I cut all ties with them. In my mind, they became nothing more than inhabitants of a distant past. 5 years passed after my brother's wedding. Since the day I severed ties with my family, my life had become remarkably quiet, almost serene. No more being judged, no more straining to meet invisible expectations. My time was now spent only on my students, my books, and quiet weekends. And that was enough. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. It was during one such autumn peaceful, though colorless, that I met Chris. His appearance at the school where I worked was purely coincidental. He was visiting several schools as the representative of a charity supporting reading programs for underprivileged children. When introduced in the principal's office, he wore a simple but elegant shirt, the kind that looked expensive without being ostentatious. His smile was calm and gentle. "My name is Chris. I was hoping to hear directly from the teachers on the ground." His voice was low, steady, and soothing to the ear. It was nothing like the fast-talking, self-congratulatory tone of the men I'd grown up hearing in Malibu. As I guided him around the school, he listened intently to everything I said and spoke to each child as though they were an old friend. In his eyes shone a genuine respect and warmth my family had never possessed. A few days later, I received a polite email at my school address from him. "I'd like to hear more details about the program if you have time." That became our first date. We spent 3 years together. Those years were like therapy, helping me recover the self-esteem I had lost over a lifetime. Chris always listened to me and truly respected my work. It wasn't until some time later that I learned he was the heir to a prestigious real estate development group. But he never flaunted it. Instead, through his actions, he taught me that wealth was meant to be used as a force for good. Then, one Saturday evening, 3 years into our relationship, at our favorite cove, Chris knelt before me and said, "Since meeting you, my world has begun to fill with color. Tracy, will you marry me?" The moment I heard those words, tears streamed down my face. Nodding again and again, I said yes. For the first time in my life, I felt fully seen, accepted, and loved as I truly was. It was the most perfect moment I had ever known. Chris gently slid the ring onto my finger, then rose and embraced me tightly. With a joyful voice, he said, "Wonderful. Now I can finally meet your family and formally introduce myself." And with that one sentence, the entire wave of happiness I had felt collapsed into nothing. Back at my apartment, sitting side by side on the sofa, I told him everything. The humiliation I suffered at my brother's wedding, The truth that my family valued people not by love, but by their usefulness. When I finished, Chris's voice carried a quiet, simmering anger. I can't believe this. Your family has no idea of your worth, how kind, intelligent, and strong you are. To treat you that way? I'll never understand it. His words felt like they were breaking the curse that had bound me for so long. Gripping his warm hand tightly, I said, "You're right, Chris, they'll never understand. That's why we don't need introductions. Instead, let's plan our wedding ourselves. That will be my way of fighting back." Chris understood the firmness of my resolve and the weight of my words. He squeezed my hand in return and nodded strongly. "All right, I'll respect your decision completely. You don't have to live by anyone else's script anymore. It's time you wrote your own story, Tracy. Let's begin our future with our own hands." And so we began planning our wedding. It was not just a celebration, but a ritual of severing the past and creating a joyful first step toward the future. When I crossed my family's names off the guest list, I felt a liberation unlike anything I had ever known. We chose to marry far from the noise and pretenses of the city in Big Sur, California, in a private ceremony. As the plans took shape, the fear that had once lingered inside me vanished, replaced by a powerful joy. This was not revenge. This was my first step as the author of my own life, writing the happiest ending I could imagine. Our wedding was nothing short of a dream. Beneath a great oak tree perched on a cliff in Big Sur, with the deep blue Pacific stretching below and the ocean breeze gently lifting my veil. Only 30 guests were invited. Instead of crystal chandeliers, the afternoon sun streamed through the trees. Instead of an orchestra, the waves and birds provided a symphony of blessings. When I exchanged vows with Chris, I felt for the first time that I was truly standing at the center of my own story as its main character. No more glancing at anyone's approval. No more trembling under invisible scores. Just looking into the eyes of the man I loved and saying I do with all my heart. In that moment, I felt the long-stained shadow of inferiority within me being completely washed away. Only shortly before the ceremony did I learn that the glass-walled, breathtaking lodge on the cliff was actually one of the world's most exclusive private resorts owned by Chris's family. When I asked, he simply blushed and said, "I just wanted to surprise you." At the reception, Chris's parents came to me with warm smiles. It was clear from their gentle eyes that Chris had already told them everything about my family. Without asking a single thing about my past, they embraced me as though I were their own daughter and said, "Thank you for choosing Chris. From now on, we are your family." Those words filled me with such relief I nearly burst into tears. For the first time in my life, I felt the unconditional, genuine love of a family. Our wedding left a deep impression on every guest. Unlike the flashy Malibu spectacles meant to flaunt wealth and status, ours was filled with warmth and authenticity. Everyone was touched by its sincerity. A few days later, that emotion began to bloom on social media. It started when a friend posted a picture of me smiling in the glow of the sunset. Soon, like a floodgate opening, posts celebrating our wedding filled the timelines. Photos of Chris and me laughing against the grandeur of Big Sur. A close friend wiping away tears during our vows. Each snapshot captured genuine emotion, not staged theatrics. Friends added heartfelt words to each image. This is what real love looks like. A wedding so beautiful it shook my soul. Not showmanship, true connection. And, well-meaning as they were, they tagged everything. Me, Chris, the private resort owned by his family, and of course his parents, renowned business leaders. In that instant, what was meant to be a small, private celebration poured into the digital world and into their world. It didn't take long for that light to reach the dark living room back in Malibu. The first call came 1 week after the wedding, on a Sunday morning. The number flashing on the screen was one I hadn't seen in years. It was Denise. When I answered, her shrill voice pierced through the speaker. "Tracy, what the hell do you think you're doing? Is it true you got married?" "Yes, 1 week ago." I replied calmly. I can't believe this. We're your family, and you didn't even invite us? And at that resort in Big Sur? Your husband is Chris Harrison? Are you mocking us? Her words sounded as frantic as they were angry. It was the voice of jealousy and desperation, the outcry of someone realizing I now held the ticket to the very world she had longed to claim for herself. As soon as I hung up, another call came, this time from my mother. Her voice was as sugary as ever, though it barely masked her agitation. Tracy, is that you? I was so worried. Denise told me you really got married? Congratulations. But why didn't you tell us? And your husband, Chris Harrison? I would have loved to meet his parents. We have so many mutual friends, we would have gotten along so well. All she cared about was appearances and her standing in society. What my mother cared about was only that. Not my happiness, only her own pride. That truth no longer surprised me. From that day on, my phone never stopped ringing. From my mother came polite-sounding but insistent demands. From Denise came messages brimming with irritation. So when will you finally let us meet him? Every single day, the messages arrived. Always the same demand: introduce us to Chris and his parents. I ignored them all, not even marking them as read, because in my heart, their story was already over. At last, my mother must have lost patience. One day, she called me directly. For a moment, I hesitated, but then I resolved to face it. This would be the final reckoning. I pressed the button to answer. Hello, Tracy. Oh, thank goodness you finally picked up. Haven't you seen my messages? I was so worried you never replied. Her voice was as sugary as ever, but behind it I could hear an edge of panic. Your father has something to say as well. And Denise is here too. I'll put this on speaker, all right? We're family, we need to talk properly. Without waiting for my answer, she switched to speakerphone. Immediately, the air on the other end grew heavy. It felt as if they had placed me on trial in an impromptu family courtroom, with me alone in the defendant's chair. My father was the first to speak. His voice was slightly more formal than usual, but still carried that cold, businesslike tone. Tracy, congratulations. I'm glad to hear you've found such a wonderful partner. That said, I would like the chance to meet Chris's parents properly. I've long hoped to speak with Mr. Harrison as a fellow member of the industry. On the surface, his words seemed calm, but beneath them was only ruthless calculation. To him, my marriage was nothing but a business opportunity. My mother quickly followed, her voice shrill. That's right, Tracy, you should have introduced us properly. It's what family does. You went and got married without even telling us. What were you thinking? And then came Denise's contemptuous voice, sharp as a blade. Honestly, you really don't get it, do you? You think you can keep this good fortune all to yourself? You're still the same selfish, naive little girl you've always been. Something inside me snapped. Years of sorrow and anger crystallized into one cold, unshakable resolve. Enough. I've heard all I need. The words slipped from my mouth, quiet, but as strong as steel. Every syllable rang clear through the speaker, reaching all three of them. Value? Business? Proper introductions? Do you want me to remind you of what you've actually given me all these years? I could feel the air freeze on the other side of the line. When I chose to become a teacher, you laughed at me, said it was a job that doesn't make money. When I chose a quiet life, you scorned me as unsociable. And you, Mother and Denise, you stood at Peter's wedding and denied my very existence. Back then, I was worth nothing to you. Isn't that right? I took a breath, then delivered the final blow, every word laced with the truth I had carried for so long. Don't you dare pretend to be family now. When I was nothing, you treated me like trash. And now, just because you smell money behind his last name, you suddenly preach family love? What you're playing isn't family. It's nothing more than an ugly pack of hyenas. Why, Tracy, that's too far. My father sputtered. But before he could go further, Denise's voice cut in, hysterical. It was just a misunderstanding. We've always been family. How can you say this? And then came my mother's broken sobs. How could you, after everything we've done for you, we've always cared for you? A misunderstanding? No, it was perfect clarity. For the first time, I understood their true nature completely. It's too late. From now on, stay out of my life forever. I spoke the words, and before any of them could respond, I ended the call. Then I blocked every number: Denise, my mother, my father, even Peter. The sunlight streaming through the living room window felt almost blinding. I could hear it like the sound of heavy, rusted chains finally shattering into pieces. After I hung up, silence filled the room. But it was nothing like the lonely silence I once knew. This was a silence of peace, of fullness. From behind me, Chris wrapped his arms gently around me. The warmth of his embrace spread through my whole body. "Are you all right?" Chris whispered. I buried my face against his chest and took a deep breath. Then I lifted my head and smiled at him. A pure, unguarded smile, the kind I hadn't felt in years. "I'm all right, more than all right. I've never felt this free in my entire life." 6 months later, we left our Malibu apartment behind and built a small house in the woods of Big Sur. It stood on a hill overlooking the ocean, with wide windows that filled the rooms with light. On weekends, Chris and I would walk along the shore or tend to the herbs in our garden. Here, no one measures my worth. No one demands anything in return. Time simply flows in peace. Sometimes I think back to Peter's wedding. Back then, I believed love was nothing more than a game, a desperate fight for the single chair at the family table. And I believed I was never worthy to sit in it. But now I know better. True love isn't about taking someone else's chair. It isn't about competing over how extravagant that chair looks. True love is building your own chairs together, in a place that feels right for you both. Even if those chairs are clumsy, handmade ones. One day, a call came. It was from my father's younger brother, Uncle George. He had always kept his distance from my father's flashy world, a straightforward man who valued sincerity. We hadn't spoken in years, but he had heard of my marriage and reached out to congratulate me. After a while of catching up, he hesitated, then shared their news. "Your father's company, it's gone bankrupt." The extravagant resort project spearheaded by Denise had become their downfall. Her glossy predictions and flashy marketing had crumbled in the face of harsh economic reality. And my brother Peter, the supposed successor, had been nothing more than my father's puppet, incapable of solving even the most practical problems as the crisis closed in. "It was a castle built on sand," my uncle said quietly. The luxurious house in Malibu was put up for sale. The friends who once surrounded my mother vanished like the tide receding from the shore. When I heard this, what rose in my heart was not joy. It was a strange, profound calm. Because in the end, everything they had believed in, everything they had chased, amounted to nothing. Wealth, status, shallow friendships, none of it remained. They had written the final chapter of their story with their own hands. After the call, I stepped out onto the terrace and looked over the vast landscape of Big Sur. Chris sat down beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulder. "What are you looking at?" Leaning into him, I pointed toward the horizon. "The next page of our story." Their story no longer intersects with mine. Blood alone does not create family. Money and status do not determine a person's worth. What truly enriched my life was the one honest love that accepted me as I was, that whispered, "You can write your own story," and quietly gave me the courage to do so. Now, I stand at the very center of the brightest spotlight of my life. But it is not a light someone else has cast upon me. It is a warm, powerful light, one that I have kindled with the person I love with our own hands.